Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Coaching. My name is Britz, executive coach, trainer, and international leadership facilitator, and host to the Lunchtime series where we add value to people's lives, happening every day at 12 o'clock on ebizradio.com. Today, we are chatting to someone who is a confidence and toxic relationship coach, helping people deal with and heal from toxic relationships. She's the author of The Lies That Bind, Overcoming Narcissistic Abuse. Please welcome Natasha Williams. Hello, Natasha. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for chatting me today, chatting with us at least. And don't you want to give people a bit of background on who you are and what you do and what we're chatting about today? I mean, I briefly touched on it, but you're the one with all the good advice.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I started on this journey because myself, I was in toxic relationships. And in those days, I didn't know what a narcissist actually was. And of course, if you're living with one, they show a certain side of themselves to you that they don't show to the rest of the world. And so when you speak to your friends and family about it, they don't actually understand what you're dealing with. I even had somebody say to me, at least he doesn't hit you. And I thought that was a bit of a, I mean, you're having verbal, emotional, financial, all sorts of abuse, but the fact that you're not being hit means it's okay. And most advice that I received was make it work. And of course, I was under the illusion that I could somehow make it work. And so I was married for 15 years. That was probably my fourth toxic relationship by that time, but I was married for 15 years, thinking that somehow it was up to me. And what I learned over that time was that I kept attracting the same kind of person with a different name. And I went through a really tough patch at that time with my then husband, because I discovered he was actually an addict. He was watching a lot of pornography. And instead of leaving, I decided to actually stay and figure out what is it about me that keeps attracting these kinds of people. And I had to go on, I mean, that was days before YouTube and Google had all this information, but I had to learn what he was up to, because what we tend to do is think that we're always on the defensive. We're always having to justify where we are, what we are up to, and then they hide what they're doing. And we don't want to be seen as nosy because that's what they do to us. And so we are constantly worrying about showing them this good side of ourselves instead of seeing what they're actually up to. When I discovered what he was up to, if somebody had told me what he was doing, I wouldn't have believed you. But the fact that I found it out for myself, that changed everything. And I've since made it my mission. I call myself a dragon slayer because they better watch it. I'm out to expose them, as it were. But it's not about them. It's actually about the people that get suckered in by them. And that is what it's about. It's about educating and teaching and helping them heal, because they leave such destruction in their wake. So that's what I do.
Yeah. It's so amazing because, I mean, nobody will know this, but you are my personal coach. So if I ever have moments of going, oh, I need to talk to someone, I'm like, Natasha, can we chat? And it's true. I remember being in a very toxic relationship to my previous one that I'm in right now. And that previous relationship, I remember very often just getting to a point where I thought that I wasn't good enough and I wasn't doing enough, that it must be me and I need to change enough for this person to love me enough. And so I constantly came back to, oh, it must be me, it must be me, it must be me, until I got to a day. And of course, from his perspective, he tried to push that button and that boundary as far as he could possibly go, until I one day I was fed up. I was just fed up with, I just gave in, and I was just, I cannot do this anymore. And the day I drew the line in the sand, I remember that he was in such disbelief of how I could have now done this and how did I get to this point. And
Yes.
So yeah, when you say toxic relation, I'm like, I too relate to how that plays out. But one of the key questions is, what is a toxic relationship and how does it affect people? Because very often people, you get used to the abuse. It becomes normal, and you kind of go, oh no, this is what love is supposed to be like. This is what love is, and you kind of go, this is normal. So you kind of you find a strategy of living with it, and you find normality in the craziness. But don't you want to just take us out to give us some good reference on what is a toxic relationship and how does it affect us?
Just to, I'll finish. You actually hit the nail on the head, because it is normal. And the reason why it's normal is because people that find themselves in toxic relationships had toxic upbringings. So I'll explain what a relationship is, but because you grew up in an environment where when you're young, you don't question it, you don't have, your sense of judgment isn't developed yet. And so you're kind of absorbing that household, and the way that your household was is equated to home, which is equated to love. And so when you get older, you start looking for home, for what feels like home, and that becomes your love relationship. And as you grow up, consciously you realize that I don't like the way my parents treated each other or treated me. And so I'm not going to find a partner like that. But on an energetic level, you're actually attracting people that feel like home. And you think, because I'm older now, I have the tools to deal with them, because I'm older, because I'm wiser. So I'm going to somehow fix these people. Well, first of all, they don't want to be fixed. They want you to be fixed. They want to change you. And secondly, what happens is when we are a child, we go into fight, flight, or freeze response. And because we are stuck in that primitive part of the brain, whenever we are faced with any kind of confrontation or something that's going to cause us to panic, as we do when we find these toxic relationships, we regress back to that fight, flight, freeze response. And so your logical, rational mind goes out the window, and you respond the way you did as a child. And that's why you end up getting stuck. Because you can think of things to say 20 minutes afterwards, but that's when your brain starts functioning again. And at that time, you are stuck in that mode. So what is a toxic relationship? Well, a lot of people come to me and they say, I'm broken and I need to be fixed. And I believe we're not broken, we're just dysfunctional. And what that means, if I say you're broken, it means you're missing an arm, or it's not joined. But with a dysfunctional, there's a blockage. It's almost like there's a lack of flow. So you will either have had a lack of support or a lack of love, or both growing up. And so you're constantly looking for that. So you're looking for somebody that's going to give you the love you never had, or you're looking for somebody that will have your back, that will give you the support. And it's a normal requirement. Every human being needs to be dependent on another human being. But when you are in a dysfunctional relationship, you find people that can't give you the support you're looking for. So you become clingy and needy on the wrong people. And so, because you give up who you are to become who you think that they want you to be, you literally lose yourself. And so because you lose yourself, it's so hard to leave, because if you left, you'd have nothing. Because you lost yourself. You've given yourself to them. So you've kind of lost everything. So it affects you on every level. Most toxic relationships, I would say 99.9%, there's some sort of addiction. It's either drugs or gambling or pornography or alcohol, financial, whatever kind of, and because there's an addiction, they will spend the money on the addiction, and they won't admit that there's an addiction, so there'll never be money available. They're also very controlling, they're very, they want to own you, and even after you leave, they still believe they own you. So even years later, they will try and contact you. So it's this devastation. They'll spend all your money, they will have smear campaigns to take you out, and some people even commit suicide because they just can't cope anymore. They've literally given everything, and including their soul.
Yeah, as you're talking, I consider the destructive behavior that I had, because my first sexual experience, because of abuse, I related pain to love. And growing up, I convinced myself that if I wasn't feeling enough pain, I would not get to the love. Until I figured that out, and I started figuring out, why am I attaching pain to the love constantly? And when I realized that, I was like, oh wow. And I kind of cut all ties with having relationships for a long time. And I really had to redefine that for myself. It's like, Like, what does love look like? What does it behave like? How does love look like in a very healthy relationship? And how do I relate to that? And so, I mean, I really, this conversation, I think is quite prevalent, not only to me, but I do feel that people also don't even realize that in a work environment, in friendships, toxic relationships still show up, even in a work environment, even in a friendship, until you start paying attention to why this is showing up, and what that common denominator is, and start really getting your brain wrapped around it. Suddenly there's an awakening of sorts that sort of, that comes to it comes to the foreground. But how do I identify toxic people? Because, like you say, I mean, 15 years you're in a relationship, you love this person, you think, oh well, I'm committed, I'm married, you're supposed to be the one. I'm supposed to do everything I can to keep this relationship together. There's the whole like supposed to expectation that marriage and that unspoken law that so many of us abide by. And we kind of go, no, like we can excuse this behavior and it's okay. So in terms of how do we identify it? How do we start going, oh, I think I may be in a toxic relationship?
Well, there's classic signs. The first thing is they want you to become part of them as soon as possible. They want to kind of get into your head. So they'll be very charming at first, and it's called love bombing. But basically, you'll feel like you've met your soulmates. There'll be some sort of...
So it's called love bombing.
Love bombing. That's right.
Like, so you bomb someone with love, and you're
bombing
like,
them with love. Absolutely. And so
okay, I've never heard that. Sure.
There will be this intensity that you will not have felt with other normal people. And I call them normal, but nobody's really normal, but non-toxic people, healthy people. And so because they want to get into your space as quickly as possible, they need to kind of muddle up your brain. So they will want to get you to know their friends as soon as possible, everybody that they know, because they want their friends to vouch for them that they're this kind of person. But what you'll find is there's a kind of a superficialness about it. Their friends might not be long-lasting relationships. There'll be somebody that they kind of know that they'll call their friend. They'll also be all over your social media too much. And in the beginning, you might think, well, that's really flattering, but actually it's not. It's too much. They want to know everything about you. They might just show up at work or at home to see if you are really where you say you are. They want to catch you unawares. So they won't tell you I'm coming to see you, because they want to know that you are where you say you are, so they can trust that you not maybe seeing other people or whatever. And they're looking for all your weaknesses. And at the time, they're going to want you to share your secrets and tell you all about you. And you'll think, oh, this person really cares. But actually what they're looking for is your buttons. So they know what to push when it comes time for them to start having power over you. So once you're now in a relationship, and you'll find that a lot of people have seen those red flags, but when you're in love and love is blind, you just ignore them. But now you're in that relationship, you're going to start noticing other things. So that one of the main things they do is they will never say sorry. They will never accept responsibility for any of their behavior. It will always be blamed on somebody else. There's always projection. It's either the weather or the government or you, which most of the time it's you. It's your fault. It's your emotional state. It's something you did, you said. And that's what I was referring to earlier. It's about putting you on the defensive so that you don't see what they're doing. So you could come and present an argument to them and say, look, why are you home late? And they'll throw it right back at you and say, why are you so needy? You're always so needy. You're always complaining about this. And look how hard I work for you. And you don't even say thank you. And then the whole subject becomes about you again, instead of the fact that they're home late and they still haven't told you why. And so that's one of the things. And I think that the most easiest way is to say, do their words match their deeds? That's a big one, because they tend to make a lot of promises, and they'll say one thing and just not do it, or do the opposite. And they'll tell you, I love you, while they're busy punching you. That is like... And we tend to...
you made me do this. You made me do this. Yeah.
You made me do this. Look how much I have to hurt you now, for you to listen, or whatever,
Yeah.
So that's, I think, and I think you have to learn actually the signs of a healthy relationship to know the difference.
And in terms of picking up the toxicity, is it a case that it could be subtle? I mean, I know that people sometimes go, "Oh no, I was just joking," or that, I didn't mean anything by it. But that subtlety of like poking at someone the whole time is also, is that sort of a signal? Because, for example, if someone constantly says to you, well, why don't you just lose weight? If you lost weight, I'd be so much more attracted to you. Life would be easier.
Yes, it'll be constant criticism.
Yeah.
They won't acknowledge your achievements. You could have done something great, and what they'll either do is completely ignore it, or they will say it's because of me that you did it. They actually can't feel emotion. I call them AI. They're humanoid. They're almost like programmed to, and they call it's called a mask carousel. So when they are trying to have a fake emotion that they're trying to put onto their face, you'll actually see a moment where they're having to run through the different faces that they have to put on, like surprise or happiness or whatever, to show you that they're having an emotion, because they actually don't have any. The real emotions they do have is envy, anger, fear. And they don't know what happiness is. So they can't stand it when you're happy. And what they'll do is they might even, that's why they don't like celebrating birthdays, special days. They'll actually fight with you. My husband never. For the first 6 years, I couldn't figure out why he was always fighting with me on my birthday. I didn't get Valentine's cards. He didn't celebrate that. I didn't get Christmas presents. I was told I'm just being insecure. But I never got anything anyway,
Well, as you talk, I remember making food during the week, and for Valentine's Day I thought, well, I'll just make it special and sort of have picnic outside or whatever, and warm up some leftover food and stuff. And I remember this person getting home, sitting down after I'd created the wonderful, like, warmed up leftover dinner, like going at me on Valentine's Day, because how dare I now for Valentine's Day warm up food?
Wow.
And I was like, I remember thinking, oh my God, this is Valentine's Day. What? I'm like, why are you not seeing the, it's just food. It's like, I don't want to waste food, and as you talk like this, I have such memories of that kind of, and I'm so glad that, on the flip side of this coin, I'm so aware of how not to fall back into the pattern of finding, like, when things are unacceptable, that's, it's supposed to be normal, or considering someone's bad behavior as okay. And where I'm proudly today, I can go, do you know what? I will bring it to your attention if I don't appreciate the way that you speak to me, or the way that what you said, or how that came across. I'm quite aware of that. But in terms of how we attract this to our lives, because I think very often people don't like the idea, just the notion of, part of this equation is part of my equation. They don't kind of want to take that responsibility and kind of go, well, it's not me. I'm in a toxic relation because that person's an ass. But part of it is, this is the attraction of my life. And how do I deal with that? How do I deal with that? And how do I deal with them?
So I call toxic people mosquitoes, right? They're everywhere. You can't get them.
Yes.
They spread malaria and they do things, but you can't eradicate them, right? But you can learn how to put repellent on. You can put mosquito roll on. So you don't necessarily attract them. You might be lucky not to have found one. You might have been lucky not to have somebody like that. But you definitely are an ideal victim. So they're just going to be out there looking for ideal victims. And you're just that naive person, almost like a deer in the woods, and the wolves are watching. And some deer don't get caught and others do. So it's not, but what happens when you get roped in, because your worldview is so different to their worldview, we think that those people, if we give, they'll give back, because that's how love works. It's a give and take, and it's a constant imbalance. You give and then they give, somebody else gives back more. No, I love you more. No, I love you even more. And that's how love grows. So we think, well, if we're not getting back, oh, maybe we're not giving enough. Maybe we weren't showing it enough. So we give even more. And we don't sit back and wait for them to give back to us, because we are needy, and we're looking for that love so desperately that we now give even more, thinking, you know what, it doesn't matter, I'll get it back tomorrow. One day becomes another day. And it's at that moment where you actually realize, oops, they're not giving back. When you actually put your foot down and say, actually, when are you going to do this for me? That instead of them saying, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I needed to, they actually fight with you or shout at you and tell you something bad about yourself, that you realize there's something wrong. And that's when you actually start waking up, when the giving back isn't happening. And what it is, it's about enabling that behavior. If somebody's treating you badly, you can't tell somebody to disrespect, to respect you, but you don't have to tolerate disrespectful behavior. And the thing is, because you want to be nice and kind, and you don't want to, people, empaths, that's what we are. We don't like confrontation. So instead of being firm and having boundaries, we tend to just be polite and nice about it, not to kick up waves, just to keep the peace. And that's how we allow it to perpetuate to that point. You'll see there's certain toxic people that don't treat others badly because they know they can't get away with it. So if they can't get away with it, but it's about being firm. And this is where people say, I don't want to be nasty. I don't want to be like them. And you don't have to be like them, but you don't have to allow them in your space. But they are going to take so much advantage of you that you have to be so firm. And that is where the teaching comes. That's where the learning comes, because you have to now stand up for yourself and say, I'm not going to allow you to cross this line. It's like building a wall around your house. If you don't have a wall, people will just walk in and out of your yard. And you expect them to not walk in and out of your yard, but you don't have anything to stop them. And it's forcing you to stand in your power and allow the right people into your space. Who are you going to give your energy to?
Yeah. In terms of lending itself to that point, is it a case of going, I really need to start paying attention to me and what my confidence is, what my resilience looks like, how much what I say love is, and I want love to show up like? Is it a case of really, because essentially the first thing that comes to mind is like, people will go, yeah, but I don't know what to do because I can't change that person. He's never going to change. That's who he is. Invariably, the conversation isn't about that person. It's why am I allowing this in my world? So as much as, because that's just, again, it's an external representation of what you will allow in your world. I think Tony Robbins mentions that often, and he goes, the measure of your life will be as much as what you would put up with, something like that. And, so it's kind of going, okay, well, how much will I put up with? And what do I say matters? What do I want for my life? So is it a case of going self-cultivation, self-confidence, self-love, self-recognition, boundaries, all of that? Is that part of the process?
Absolutely. It all boils down to the underlying belief of somebody who attracts us people is, I'm not good enough. Nobody will love me. I'm not worthy. I don't have self-worth. And so if I give to everybody else, then they will love me. So it's done vicariously via them, because if they love me, then I don't have to love myself. I'll give to them. I'll love everyone. And then it's done that way. But the fact is, they're not going to love you. They're only loving themselves. So why can't you learn from them and love yourself? Nobody entitled them any more than you gave them that entitlement. But it's a deep wound that needs to be healed, because it comes from childhood, and it's not done. It's not at a point where you're consciously already developed. It comes from a place where you didn't have what a healthy child experienced. You didn't have either the support or the love, or both. So when you can find a way, you can't change your childhood, but you're an adult now, and you can say, I don't need it to define me anymore. And so that is where the healing starts. You say, I don't have to be, if you planted a tree in bad soil, it's not going to grow very well. It's going to struggle. And if a storm comes, it might be taken out. If you had a tree that was planted in healthy soil, it's going to thrive. And if a storm came, it would survive it. Now, we are not trees. We can move, we can change.
Yeah.
So it's just the analogy is that we might have come from a place where we didn't have the soil, the nutrition, but it doesn't mean we are defined by that. We can learn from others and we can adapt healthier behaviors.
Absolutely. So, Natasha, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I love it when someone speaks my language. If you could leave us with three tips on the awareness of toxic relationships, what would those 3 tips be in sort of summary of today's conversation?
Okay, so tip 1, the person that you're dealing with, it's not about them. They're showing you something about yourself. You're either allowing yourself to be bulldozed, or you are projecting your lack of self-worth onto them, expecting them to love you. Also be aware that there are people that are not like you. They have different minds, different thoughts, and they are going to not behave in your best interest. So, and the thirdly is people like us tend to trust too much. Don't just give someone your trust. They need to earn it. And that's where their deeds match their words. If they make a promise, if they don't fulfill on it, you're not just going to blindly hand over your trust. They have to earn it. They earn your trust and they earn your respect.
Fantastic. And I think in summary of that of what you're mentioning now, it's such a difficult conversation to have. Like, well, what is my role in this? To me, it's always like, it's like it sticks you in the rib cage, and you go like, what is my role in this? But yeah, it is,
when you get it, your life changes.
You're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is what I've allowed for so long, right? So Natasha, if we want to get hold of you, and I mean, your book, The Lies That Bind, Overcoming Narcissistic Abuse, is also out there for anyone who wants to get hold of it. But where do we get hold of you? Where do we go? Give us some more insight about touching base with you.
Right, well, I have a website. It's called Inarah, which is INARAH.co.za, and it means bringing light into the darkness. If you join my Facebook page, which is natasha.williams.inarah, I do lots of videos. I share a lot of information, so I'm giving insights on there. It's almost like a training page where you can actually interact with me. So it's a great forum for people to meet other people like that, but mainly to get learnings, because I'm here to help educate and spread the word.
Fantastic. Guys, so everything that Natasha's saying, all that information will be in the description box below. And she's a confidence and toxic relationship coach. Natasha Williams, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing, and such a good conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Thanks, everybody.
Chat to you soon.
Thank you.
Ciao.